rejoice and come in. Enter, rejoice and come in. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice and come in. And that's the melody. Words just change a little bit. So sing with me if you'd like. Open your heart to the song. Open your heart to the song. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice and come in. Don't be afraid of some change. Don't be afraid of some change. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice and come in. Enter, rejoice and come in. Enter, rejoice and come in. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice and come in. Enter, rejoice and come in. Enter, rejoice and come in. Thank you.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Maria, and I'll be your platform assistant this morning. Very pleased to welcome back to our service Reverend Margaret Morgan Maat, who is from the Houston area and a longtime friend of Unity DC. And of course, as you just heard from Lea Morris, she will be gracing us with her music today. So welcome back, Lea. And now we'll turn to our centering prayer. Please take a moment to get in a comfortable seated position and close your eyes if you like. Take a moment to become aware of your breath, gently inhaling and exhaling. The prayer that I'm going to read you today is from A Course in Miracles, chapter 16, called The Forgiveness of Illusions. I, who am host to God, am worthy of him. He who established his dwelling place in me created it as he would have it be. It is not needful that I make it ready for him, but only that I do not interfere with his plan to restore me to my own awareness of my readiness, which is eternal. I need add nothing to his plan, but to receive it, I must be willing not to substitute my own in place of it. And so it is.
Sing it with me. I believe in the power of kindness. Ooh, I believe in the power of love. Ooh, I believe in the power of kindness. Ooh, I believe in the power of love. We don't know what's coming, but we can help shape what's ahead. With kindness as our currency, the commonwealth is in our hands. So give a little, give a little, give a lot, don't stop. A helping hand makes the world go round. There's more than enough. Ooh, I believe in the power of kindness. Ooh, I believe in the power of love. Ooh, I believe in the power of kindness. Ooh, I believe in the power of love. The honeybee serves sweetness just to help the whole world bloom. Bringing love from the flower to the fruit, we can learn a thing or two. So give a little, give a little, give a lot, I believe in the power of kindness. I believe in the power of love.
Yeah, I feel a little bit like a teenage girl who got front row seats to a Taylor Swift concert.
I will
It
take
was
that.
only a couple of weeks ago I got to hear your music for the first time. And I immediately went and I downloaded all your albums onto my Pandora, got onto YouTube and put a link on and sent it to 3 of my friends. And when I discovered that you were the one to be the musician today, I was just thrilled. Thank you. Because every time you sing, I feel the Spirit. Thank you. It is such a privilege when I'm able to come and be with this group of people. You have supported my spiritual development over the years, now more than 10 years that I've been in association with you. And every time I come, I am blessed to the hilt, and you give me the energy I need to continue to minister in my own world. So thank you for inviting me here today. When I was in college, I was assigned by a teacher to read Pilgrim's Progress by John Bunyan. And I was so excited to be given this assignment because I was really into the idea of a spiritual journey. And I was just sure that this book was going to give me many more insights so that I could embrace my journey with more understanding and inspiration. I was sorely disappointed. Leave it to a good Calvinist to be able to take something as exciting and as adventuresome as a spiritual journey and turn it into something grim and ominous. But I discovered through the years that that book stayed with me in this way, that I realized for the first time that it was not my old conception as a spiritual journey that we just put one foot in front of the other and keep going, that we actually visit places on our spiritual journey. And Bunyan is so good at giving a name to those places, although I would not relate much to the places he visited on his journey. What I have come today to share with you are some of those places in my own journey, in the hope that you will also have an opportunity to reflect on your own experience of the spiritual pilgrimage and identify and reconnect with that inner wisdom that you gained in each of those places. I think the analogy here is more like some of the video games I play, where it's a quest, and you're not able to move from one level to another until you can pass some tests and gain something that you need to take to the next stage of your journey. And that's the imagery we're going to use today, because face it, we're going to need to stay in connection with those kinds of inner wisdom in order to navigate 2025 and beyond. The first place that I would like to share with you that has meaning for me is what I call the unexpected ambush. Or maybe we would call it the gully of the gut punch. This is where you're just walking along, minding your own business, pretty happy with the way things are going, and suddenly you find yourself flat on your back, totally disoriented. Nothing makes sense anymore. All the things that you believed are somehow being destroyed, and you haven't yet figured out how to replace them with something new. The Apostle Paul had this experience on the road to Damascus. He was so intent that he knew exactly how to follow God, and he was going around and persecuting these crazy new people called Christians, when suddenly he was dismounted from the horse he was on. He was suddenly blind. He had seen a light. And it took him several years to fully embrace what this transformation was going to be like, to now be the chief architect of a new way of thinking that would bring the Christian faith to the Gentiles. I've had these experiences myself where I just am so disoriented. I've lost my way. And each time I think about it as the idea of J.B. Phillips saying, your God is too small. You've outgrown your concept of God. And this is the way life has of helping us to get rid of the old ways of thinking and instituting some new ways of thinking. I'd like to bring kind of a modern day Apostle Paul experience, a story. This is a story about a young man named Mark Solin. And he was just, again, minding his own business, working as an events planner. And suddenly he began losing his eyesight. He went to all of the doctors. He could not find any help for his malady. But then he decided it was worth it to him to go to the East and to consult with the spiritual teachers there in hopes that he might find the insight he would need to regain his sight. He walked up to one spiritual teacher, and immediately after telling the story, this spiritual teacher looked at him and said, "Go home and call your mother and father." Well, he was alarmed and actually angry at hearing this because he thought he had navigated his family situation pretty good. It was not an especially happy childhood, but he had tried his best to maintain a relationship with his parents under the circumstances. So he decided that was really bad advice, and he walked over to the next spiritual teacher and he told him his story. And guess what that spiritual teacher said? Call your parents, go home, and make peace with them. Well, that was just too much of a coincidence, so he decided maybe he better take that advice. He flew home. He went to his mother's home. He had never been emotionally close with his mother. In fact, when she would try to hug him, his body would stiffen up, and it was actually physically painful for him to be hugged by her. And so immediately, of course, when he arrived at the house, she hugged him, and he felt that pain and that anguish, but he stayed with it. And he asked her to just keep holding him, keep holding him. And finally, his body began to relax and to loosen up. And for the first time, he and his mother gained an emotional connection. And so they talked about it, and he discovered that when he was just 2 years old, his mother had to have gallbladder surgery, and for 3 weeks, she was unavailable to him. And that 2-year-old little child really didn't understand why his mother had abandoned him during that time. And it was just too painful for him when she returned to risk reaching out and accepting her love, because he knew it might go away again. And in this encounter they had together, that relationship was healed, and they were able to share that connection for the first time of mother and child. Well, then he went over to his father's house, and he began to practice visiting over time and assuring his father that he loved you. I love you, Dad, and I appreciate the things that you've done for him. His father was not a particularly emotional man, and he would kind of shrug off Mark's comments, but Mark stayed with it. He would go over and visit, and each time try to tell a story about something his dad had done for him. And finally, his father looked at him and said, "I really didn't ever know that you loved me." And that began a breakthrough in their relationship. It was not Mark's intention by this time to try to get his physical sight restored, because he felt like his spiritual sight had increased so much that that was all he really needed. But believe it or not, after healing this relationship with his parents, his physical sight returned, even though the doctors told him there was so much scar tissue in his eyes that was not possible. This is the idea of the gut punch, of the unexpected ambush. It leaves us vulnerable, but yes, it results in transformation, even liberation. And we begin to understand a new way to think about love, to think about God, to reorient our lives to a new calling. And for Mark, that meant spending the rest of his life helping other people heal their family traumas so they could experience true love and emotional connection. The second place on the spiritual journey that I'd like to share, I will call the uninvited guest. For the Apostle Paul, this was a thorn in the flesh. Do you remember that story when Paul had this something happen? We don't really know what it was, whether it was a physical malady or an emotional or even a spiritual barrier. But there was something, and it was so vexing to him to have to experience this, that he asked God to remove this thorn in the flesh. And his prayers were to no effect. He tried 3 times, and then finally he heard Spirit say to him, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." This is a different thing from the gut punch where there's a transformation. This is about acceptance of something that happens. I have one of these in my story. I had an illness when I was in my early 30s. It was called chronic fatigue syndrome at that time. They didn't know much about it. People were not getting well from it yet. And as I experienced it and I endured it and I learned from it, the key to my healing from that was very different than the imagery I'd had about illness before. I'd always heard fighting words, let's fight this cancer. But I discovered that instead, this was the kind of malady that you needed to accept and go with the flow with, to work with it in order to be able to find the healing that one needed. It reminds me of a story of a woman who had a knock at the door one day. And when she went to open it, and let this person in, she discovered to her horror that it was the devil. Well, first her response was, "Let's get him out of here." And she told him to leave, and he refused. She tried to force him out. She tried to shame him out. Nothing worked. The devil remained. And so finally she decided, well, if I'm going to have to live with the devil, I'm going to make a cup of tea and share it with him and welcome. We might as well have a cup of tea. It's this kind of acceptance that helps us to understand those things that happen in our life where the darkness comes in. Lea, I was so grateful for your song, Honor the Dark. That's the essence of what we're talking about. This is the idea that Jesus taught to pray for our enemies. I told God just last week, God, if you're going to put that, Jesus, if you're going to say that, if you're going to put it in the scripture, you need to put a warning label on it. Because what happens when we begin to pray for our enemies is we begin to put ourselves into emotional connection with that person's darkness, which is also our light. It gets very light, dark oriented. It's the idea that if we can embrace the part of ourselves that's not so pretty, that we can love others more deeply and to have empathy for them. I recently heard an interview with Joan Baez. She was on Krista Tippett's show On Being. What a treat that was. She was only in her early 20s when she sang her beautiful folk songs for the March on Washington, D.C. with Martin Luther King. As she was in midlife, she began to wonder why she had certain symptoms of some emotional distress and dysfunction, and she decided to go deeper and find out what was causing them. And as she began into therapy, she discovered that she had been keeping a secret from herself as well as the world about a terrible situation in her childhood. She had loved, she had adored, she had respected her father. But what she and her sisters had been hiding and suppressing all of those years is that he actually also abused his daughters. And Joan's way of coping with this was actually to develop something called dissociative identity. It's what we used to call multiple personalities. And it was so interesting that as she learned to discover all these different characters that were in what she called her inner family. And with the help of her psychologist, the answer to this was not to tell them to go away, but to start to get to know them, to get comfortable with them, and to see what wisdom they had for her. Now, as it turns out, as she was able to accept them and to get to know the characters, even to let them express poetry through her, that finally one day one of them knocked on her head, she said, and says, "I want out." And so a few of these characters left her, others she still has with her today. And she gives us a great example. And she said, fortunately, my therapist didn't say, "Joan, you need to get off the road and stop your concert tours. You need to go in for treatment. I want you here in my office every day working on this." She said, "No, we get to the place of healing through working with it as we go." I was still on my tours. I still wrote my poetry. I still was active in this social movement, but I was able to finally come to peace with these. Now, that's a pretty dramatic example, but it gives us the opportunity in our circumstances when we have one of these thorns in the flesh to learn how to cope and handle and thrive in that situation. The old imagery from the past was that when a dragon appeared, we took out our sword and we slew that dragon. But the new imagery for what we learn from the thorn in the flesh is, in fact, we need to tame the dragon. Or as one of the movies that is out there right now, How to Train a Dragon. The third place I'd like to share with you is the place I call the paralysis of paradox. You know, postmodern life is pretty complicated, and most of the time we're over our heads. Tomorrow, in the city where many of you are living in that area, we've got the celebration of Martin Luther King Day, the flag still flying half-mast for Jimmy Carter, and the inauguration of Donald Trump. Is there not some paradox in that? What do we do with these paradoxes? Just yesterday, what came on my phone as the scripture for the day was from Psalm 139. "If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, the place of the dead, you are there. If I say, surely the darkness shall cover me, and the light about me be night, even the darkness is not dark to you. The night is bright as the day, for darkness is as light with you." That's a pretty dramatic set of paradoxes. Heaven and hell, darkness and light. One of the paradoxes that we experience, and one that we celebrate at Unity Center, is the paradox that we are both divine and human. And as I work with that imagery, what I like to do every day is get up and do a physical exercise, because I really don't always know how to be both of those things at once. This is the paralysis of paradox, when we hold these two things in separate hands, and then we say, but which one, what's going on here? And what we need to learn to do instead is to join those things together. And so this is the exercise that I do, the practice every day. I stand up and I breathe up into the inner part of the upper torso to connect with my divinity, with that spark of the divine, with the God within me. And then I begin to breathe down just into the lower torso and make a grounded connection with the earth beneath me. Even sometimes that human experience of darkness, but also the joy of being human. And then I began to breathe up, breathe down, breathe up, breathe down. And finally, I realize I can put those together. And the next stage of this practice is to do both together, shooting out that exhale into both the upper torso and lower torso together, because that's where I feel the Christ in me. Because Christ, was both divine and human. And when I breathe both of those in at the same time in one breath, I connect with the confidence that I too am human and divine. And now I can integrate those things into the day. The next step is to put my right arm out to connect with others like me, and my left arm out to connect with those who are so different, including my enemies. And now I'm in the shape of a cross. And Jesus taught that that's the shape by which we live, this reality of being both human and divine, of extending love to those places where it's easy and those places where it's hard, to the light and to the darkness. This is the shape that Jesus took on earth when he opened up his arms to receive the children, when he opened up his arms to receive the tax collectors and those others that society had rejected, when he opened up his arms to that rich young ruler and said, "Oh, what you need to do is learn how to let go." This is also the shape he took when the religious and political leaders were so threatened by love that they decided to do away with him. And this is the shape that he continues to take as the living Christ, the resurrected Christ. This is the shape that we are invited to take. I'd like for us now to enter into a time of meditation. I'd like to invite you to think about your spiritual journey. Think about one of those places that you've traveled. Give that place on your spiritual journey a name. What would you call it? I'll give you just a few moments to think about that. What inner wisdom did you gain by that experience in that place? Which of those pieces of inner wisdom do you need to be reminded of to make it through and to thrive and to grow in 2025 and beyond? I'll give you just a few moments to contemplate. For John Bunyan, the end of the spiritual journey was a celestial city. He can be excused in that day and time for believing that there wasn't much hope for an experience in an earthly existence that could truly, really begin to understand God's intentions and love for the world. But we know better. And our vision is not just a celestial city, although it's so important that we know that after death, there is a spiritual place for us where we'll experience great joy and love. But our spiritual journey is about bringing heaven to earth. I've been reading a lot of Dietrich Bonhoeffer lately. One of the things that I love about his writing is when he says this: it's very important to obey God's commandments. And one of the most important commandments is this: peace on earth. May it be so.
Convergence of celebrations tomorrow. It's very auspicious. And we don't always know what everything means. But this is a song that was written by Melanie DeMore, a singer-songwriter from California. And I want to make sure I get her lyrics exactly right. And it's about our ongoing journey, that we can't control all of the steps, all the details around us, but we can take each step one by one with love, echoing our pilgrim's journey, so to speak. And again, this is another song that if you're so inclined, it would be wonderful if you'd like to sing along. You gotta put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. You gotta put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Don't give up hope. You're not alone. Don't you give up. Keep moving on. Yes, you gotta put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Lift up your eyes. Don't you despair. Look up ahead, 'cause our path is there. You gotta put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Oh, we gotta put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Sometimes we're scared. Oh, I know that's true. But here I am, right next to you. So we gotta put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Yes, we gotta put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Thank you.
And now we come to our closing prayer. This is also from the Course in Miracles, chapter 16, the forgiveness of illusions. This year, let us determine not to deny what has been given us by God. Let us awake and share it, for that is the only reason He has called to us. Today, let us resolve together to accept the joyful tidings that disaster is not real and that reality is not disaster. Reality, with a capital R, is safe and secure and wholly kind to everyone and everything. There is no greater love than to accept this and be glad. For love asks only that we be happy and will give us everything that makes for happiness. This year, let us invest in truth and let it work in peace.